that those stories were folklore, that they weren't based on any kind of real sightings. They were just people would see a bear or whatever, and the standard explanation.
Yeah.
That it was a misidentification. But it so happened that years later, when I started my career in journalism, I was working for that very same county newspaper whose stories I had read over 20 years prior, actually about 25 years prior. And it occurred to me, I started off there writing editorials and columns. It occurred to me it would be interesting to see if anybody had any similar experiences in that time, or whether that was just something that occurred, back in the 50s. And so I ran an article in the paper, and I just very generally requested that anybody had seen any unusual wildlife sightings that they could report them to me. Mm-hmm. Well, sure enough, I started getting stories about seeing an ape-like creature up to that very time that I was making the inquiry. So not only had the stories not disappeared, but they were still around, and people were having amazing sightings. And that's how I got started in investigating reports of wild primates in East Texas.
So, would you say that your field and your work in journalism has helped you within the field of cryptozoology?
Well, yes, I think it has, Shannon, because basically I was trained I've got my degrees in literature and philosophy, and I got into journalism and applied those critical thinking skills to reporting. Mm-hmm. And I acquired the habit of listening to people without prejudging whether they were crazy or not crazy.
Yeah.
Or, I just listened and made notes of the details. And so, yes, absolutely. What that did is it trained me into being a good listener and to without leading people on, let them tell their story. And what happened then is I started seeing patterns and corroborative evidence from the testimony of people who had sightings who were unknown to other people who had sightings, but they reported basically very similar things. So yes, and I think it's important in cryptozoology that we try to establish some reference base. Mm-hmm. To look for patterns, so that otherwise we may just be dealing with people's subjective hallucinations, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But if people are reporting similar things, then that gives an air of objectivity to it, which puts it in a whole different ballgame.
So let's kind of switch gears a little bit. I'm going to touch on your other couple of books, like Weird Texas and that thing, in just a little bit. But I do want to start kind of switch gears and talk about Bigfoot, Exploring the Myth and Discovering the Truth, which is your newest release, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought. Just wanted to double check before I said it as a fact and it wasn't true. But can you kind of take a brief moment to talk about how this book came about? And I know that it was co-authored as well, and how you kind of decided how you were going to co-author it and how that system kind of worked for you, gentlemen.
Well, that was interesting how that fell out. My sister moved with my brother-in-law to North Carolina. She grew up here where I did. She was still living in Southeast Texas, and she lived up there for several years. And this was in the western North Carolina in the mountains. And she found a book in a gift shop in Black Mountain, North Carolina, called Nature's Secret Agents by my friend and co-author Tom Burnett. She recognized right away the similarities in his research observations and mine, because she had worked with me quite a bit over the years, helping me out, and she read my stuff and was familiar with my theories. And in that book, I had, in my first book, I had talked about what I thought was a connection between mystery primate sightings or Bigfoot sightings, and except we didn't call it Bigfoot in Texas, we call it the wild man. She had seen the connection she had understood that I had made a connection between that and mystery light forms. One particular mystery light form called ghost lights. Now, the ghost lights is, again, not mere folklore. It is a genuine scientific unknown. There are certain places in the country or in the world where what's called a standing ghost light phenomenon occurs. And what this is these are mystery light forms, typically about beach ball size, that appear to be naturally occurring electrical plasmas. I have researched this for many years. I've corresponded with scientists and researchers around the world about it. Even had a team of physicists from Japan come visit us in East Texas and confirmed that this was a good example location. And so what I was doing is investigating, well, what is the link between these mystery light manifestations and the Bigfoot sightings? Well, it turned out Tom had made the same association, and he was the only current American Bigfoot researcher that I knew of who had made that association. So I contacted him. I got a copy, got his book, read it. He left his address, sent him a letter, and we realized how much of our research was in common, so we decided to collaborate. Now, interestingly enough, most of Tom's research has been done is within a few miles of Brown Mountain, North Carolina. Now, there is also a famous ghost light.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
There.
Yeah, those I have heard of.
Brown Mountain Light.
Yeah.
Well, for all intents and purposes, it seems to be the same phenomenon that occurs in East Texas. So you had a situation there where you had a ghost light area, Bigfoot sightings in the immediate vicinity, and those aren't the only places in the country that occurs. It also occurs in Florida, Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, and who knows where else. And y'all probably have some ghost lights in Georgia. I don't know, but Tom, as a matter of fact, is a native Georgian, and he basically is retired to North Carolina, and so that's how we got started working together. And Tom, he's not a professional writer, but he's a great storyteller. And I told him, I said, look, I got my degree in English, and my profession is journalism. So you tell the stories, I'll put them in a format where the publishers will, would be acceptable to the publishers, or at least I think it would be. And then I blended in my stories, and then we put in our scientific analysis of it, and our our speculation on what it all might mean. And I think it definitely shows, we're not in favor with a lot of the Bigfoot research organizations, Shannon, because most of them want to assume that Bigfoot is nothing more than an unidentified ape.
Yeah.
And we think there's a lot more to Bigfoot than that. And we think it has paranormal aspects to it. And a lot of Bigfoot research organizations, that scares them off. They think that ruins their reputation. And so they avoid dealing with that. And what Tom and I, what we like to point out is that, look, if you do have some kind of parameter to the phenomenon that deals with weird energies and how they might affect the mind, how they might affect our organs of perception, or whatever. If you just ignore that, then you're not dealing with a full deck, and you're never going to make any progress in understanding what this thing is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. My expertise field is most certainly not cryptozoology, but just from the work that I've done on this show and, those that I have talked to, it seems quite apparent to me that we'd have to be dealing with something a little bit more than just an evolved ape. It's obviously intelligent and keeps itself hidden. There's too much intelligence there just to be saying, no, it's an evolved ape.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we point out, and I've been on shows like yours, and I've had people call in, and they say, well, what you're talking about doesn't sound like a Bigfoot. And I like to point out that we don't really claim that what we're dealing with is what has solved the Bigfoot enigma or even addressed it, because nobody knows whether the animals that are, assuming that there actually are animals seen in the Pacific Northwest, for example, are similar or the same species as the one that lives in the South, or seen in the South. They could be totally different animals. I like to joke with my West Coast listeners and say, I'm sure that the West Coast Bigfoot are smarter and more liberal and more politically correct than the Southern one. But seriously, they could be totally different.
Yeah.
The Bigfoot that are seen up there are typically described as bipedal and walking upright. The ones seen in the South, at least from our experience of what we've been able to, certainly the ones in East Texas and up there in North Carolina, and I've corresponded with people from Louisiana and Arkansas, adjoining states, and they tend to be also bipedal, but they're also capable of going on all fours. And in fact, it seems like when they're really in a hurry and running, they don't run upright; they run on all fours like an ape would. So, excuse me.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that when we get into, you were talking about how they're obviously intelligent because they're able to remain hidden. And what we do in our book is that we try to look into how could this be? What gives it this ability? And we get into some very, down to earth speculations, like, for example, that it could just be very expert at camouflaging itself, and that nature has provided it for that with long, shaggy hair that works as effectively as a ghillie suit. And in the South, where they're mostly seen are very densely forested, and be very easy for them to camouflage themselves. But we think that there's other factors involved, and this involves probably, and this is where it would go over into the paranormal a little bit, is that we think that the Bigfoot show signs of having telepathic ability. Now, this is something, again, that mainstream science in the United States won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. We have very rigid attitudes about things like that, in our scientific academia and so on. But this isn't the case in other parts of the world. And there has been a lot of reputable, distinguished scientific research done, for example, in England and in the former Soviet bloc, on animal telepathy, and such as Dr. Rupert Sheldrake of England. And he has done a lot of controlled tests that seem to indicate, for example, that pet owners, especially dog owners, can develop what is essentially a telepathic bond with their dogs. Now, this doesn't mean that the dog is reading their mind or that the dog is reading their thoughts. And it probably is not. It's what's called mind-to-mind contact communication. In other words, instead of having a verbal, it goes beyond body language. Sheldrake and others have postulated that mind-to-mind contact is how most animal communication actually takes place. It's nonverbal, and that it happens in a time frame that cannot be explained by ordinary means. And he cites examples like flocks of birds, for example, that if you see them down here in the South in the rice fields, for example, you can see tens of thousands of birds take off and they all turn the same direction in the exact same time. And Sheldrake points out that this kind of for them to be able to communicate that fast cannot be accounted for merely physical means. Mm-hmm. And then he wrote a book, Dogs Who Know When Their Masters Are Coming Home. And in it, he gave all these examples of tests that they ran, and dogs that would go to the door and wait for their master to show up. And they set it up so that the dog just had to figure out a schedule. Mm-hmm. In other words, the owner would change their schedule, and the dog would still pick it up. In the Soviet Union, or actually I believe it was in Czechoslovakia, there was a Dr. Kountze, and he postulated what he called bioradiational energy, that there was an actual biological energy field that was the medium whereby animals could communicate mind to mind. Mm-hmm. When we think of telepathy, too often we think of thoughts. And our thoughts, we think of being composed of sentences and words. But this kind of telepathy is more like pictures and intention. You know, like you may have experience with a dog, for example. You can walk in a room, and if the dog hadn't known you, he picks up right away whether you're good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or whether you have ill intentions or whether you're okay, you know, they pick it up just like that. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of communication would probably have to do with mental images and intentionality. And what we're saying is that there's a lot of these groups that they go out with all kinds of scientific equipment, expeditions looking for Bigfoot, and they may hear something howling, they may, be a footprint or something, but they're never able to track one down or see one. And we think this is partly because the animals can not only use their camouflaging ability, but they can use their telepathic ability, and basically it's like an early warning system. And if you go out, especially with what they might imply as hostile intent, basically with an invade and conquer attitude, they're going to pick it up right away. And they're going to make themselves scarce. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's not far-fetched, in my personal opinion.
No, it's not.
Let's get down to Bigfoot sightings and the volume of Bigfoot sightings. In your research, would you hypothesize that there's a certain area of the country that has a higher volume of Bigfoot sightings?
Well, yeah, and this again makes perfect sense. The highest volume is in the Pacific Northwest, the woods of Oregon and California and Washington, the Northwoods of Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan, the Ohio River Valley in Kentucky and Ohio, and in the South. And those are the four most densely forested regions in the United States. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that they would be there because that's where they live. They live in areas that they're arboreal to some extent. They're forest land creatures. They live where there's an abundant natural food supply and plenty of water. And also, people used to ask me, like, well, if there's Bigfoot out there, how come the hunters don't shoot one? How come the hunters, you don't hear from the hunters? I said, look, that's where I get most of my sightings reports from, is from hunters.
Yeah.
Now, you go out in the woods, like where I live, it's run over with wild hogs, feral hogs. We have, quite a few deer, but you go out in the woods and try to find one of them. It's hard.
Yeah.
If you do see one, Shannon, you might have a split second to get off the shot, or to take a photograph. You might have a split second. But what a lot of people are doing nowadays, and what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bake them in and use what technology we have available to obtain photographs. And there's more and more photographs showing up because more and more people are equipped with iPhones and stuff. Most of the photographs are not very conclusive. And you know, you could have a perfect photograph, and people would still question it.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but what we hope to do is get enough photographs from enough different areas around the country, particularly in the South, and to demonstrate some of those patterns and suggestive of objectivity that we were talking about. One of the things that we've noticed is that we have two photographs that we believe to be of an unknown primate. One of them is a full frontal shot, and these are on our website, by the way, and our website is bigfootthebigpicture.net.
Mm-hmm. And it's also been up on our viewers' screen all night long, so they have it to write down.
Okay, good. Now, you can go to the photo page. In the upper left, you'll see a picture of people. If you glance at it casually, it might look like the rear end of a bear. But we show it compared with the rear end of black bears taken by the same camera in the same place, and there's no comparison. This thing, in order for it to be a bear, viewed from the rear, what appears to be the animal's head would have to be a protruding shoulder blade of a bear. And the shoulder blade, at the shoulder, that bear would have to be over 6-7 feet tall. So that doesn't add up. Also, you couldn't find a black bear that you could contort in such a way that it would have the proportions and the shapes of what we show there. Now, if you take that picture, and what I recommend is that you blow it up about 150%, because the contrast isn't that good. And if you blow it up and you look at the top, you're going to see two big old eyes staring at you. And once you see those eyes, then the rest of it kind of falls into place. Then you can see how the right leg, the right arm, or leg stands out from the rest of the body, and then you'll see its rear end sticking out. So we believe that to be a male Bigfoot. Again, I hesitate to use the word Bigfoot because I prefer to use just a district primate.
Yeah.
And we got another picture. This one, based on the camera positioning and so on, we think was at least 6.5 feet tall. We got another picture, close up, and the animal is about 5 feet tall because of the positioning of the camera. And it's really close up, and it clearly shows the eye socket and nasal ridge that is characteristic only of primates. And you can see the hairline the face basically has no hair, and you can see the hairline and the eye sockets and the nasal bridge. And if you could compare that, it looks almost identical to the proportions to a spider monkey. A howler monkey. A howler monkey. Mm-hmm. Which of course is a native South American primate. They're not known to exist in North America, but this animal, one of the things it's known for is howling all the time. A lot of people have heard these southern Bigfoot howling. I myself have experienced that. That was the one experience I had, Shannon, that convinced me that this was absolutely something real and not just people's imagination. Because I heard the thing howling in the dark, probably not more than about 50, 60 feet from me. And it was so loud, it was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. It make your ears ring, it make your chest cavity reverberate. It sounded like, I like to describe it as a cross between an elephant and a freight train, or with a growling type quality to it. Strange undulations, extremely long duration, and no known animal, or no animal known to be native to North America, can produce a sound like that. And since that time, I've had my experience corroborated by two actual Park Service employees who had similar experiences in the Big Thicket Preserve, both of which were reported to their superiors, both of which are commented that we don't have any animals down here that are known to exist that can make that kind of a vocalization. Well, let me just stop. You might have another question at this point.
Yeah, well, here I kind of like to play devil's advocate a little bit, Mr. Riggs, and
Okay.
throw questions out from the skeptic's point of view, because that's the most I hear, as far as questions go all the time, is just skeptical questions. So I want to kind of throw out at you, the question about why, out of as many people that is in this field right now studying cryptozoology and that are actually out there doing field work, why don't we have some kind of solid, concrete DNA evidence, something?
Well, now, Shannon, that just depends on who you listen to, because there have been several specimens of hair samples, for example, that have returned of unknown primates. Now the thing is, we don't have anything to compare it with except known primates. But there have been several studies. Dr. Jeff Meldrum's done one, has been involved with one. Dr. Ketchum, from East Texas, supposedly she has collected specimens from several places around the country, and they come back, and most of them are hair samples with follicles on them. But there's been a number that have come back as unknown primate, or like almost human but not quite human, and not almost gorilla or whatever, but not quite. Mm-hmm. So those are intriguing. Another thing is what they call the dermal ridge evidence in the footprints. Now most footprints are kind of sloppy, and you don't have a lot of detail, but there's a few. Again, Dr. Meldrum is involved with one. There's a primate footprint and fingerprint expert down here in Conroe, Texas, outside of Houston, named Jimmy Chilcutt, my acquaintance. He has been involved with several research efforts where they have found footprints, for example, that show the dermal ridges. Now that's the ridges in your hands and your fingers and your feet that make the footprints. Make fingerprints. Your feet have the same thing, dermal ridges. Mr. Chilcutt has examined several specimens that he says there's no doubt in his mind that they're coming from some kind of primate, but they don't match up. Again, they don't match up with any known primates. And this man is an expert. He knows what he's talking about. He consulted with police departments at all different levels. And he basically says, look, people ask me if I believe in Bigfoot, and I say, well, I don't know. If something's making these prints, and they are not fakes.
Yeah. So
I would cite those. Now, people also ask me, well, why haven't there been any fossils or any, remains of any of them found? Well, again, that depends on who you listen to. There have been several reports, and a lot of this gets suppressed, by the way, by mainstream academia, because it doesn't fit the worldview that we've been handed and brainwashed into believing. Mm-hmm. But there have been graves and skeletons found of giants in North America, and quite a few different places. I couldn't name them off the top of my head; it's not my expertise. But 7, 8, 9 foot tall. They appear to be humans. Well, see, so people think that Bigfoot is like closer to a human than an ape. Mm-hmm. And if you found a skeleton like that, it could have been from a Bigfoot, and you might just assume it was from some kind of a giant human. And it would take a lot of study to determine the difference. And then people ask me, well, why hasn't there been any fossils found? Well, fossils do not form well in forest lands or jungles. This is a known scientific fact, because the remains break down too rapidly to form fossils. And that's also a good reason why you might not come across a Bigfoot corpse in the woods, like was hit by a car or something, or that somebody shot and just ran away from. Because in the woods down here, they're going to decompose very rapidly. You're going to have predators, buzzards and so on, and coyotes and they will dissipate. The remains could be scattered. Plus, the animals might be smart enough to bury their dead. So we don't know. There's a lot of factors involved here. But to say that there is no hard physical evidence for Bigfoot is just not accurate. There is a lot of physical evidence,
but maybe just not publicized.
Not publicized, because people don't. To be honest with you, Shannon, people don't make a lot of inquiry into this. They just kind of say that, well, either I got to believe or not believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They don't, and I'm sure you've noticed that from your research. People say, well, I don't believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'm saying?
That's true. And you know what? I tell them, I say, you don't have to believe, and you can laugh at, whatever you want. But when you need my help, I'll be there.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. See, that's what I'm talking about, Shannon. People say, well, they think it's just a matter of faith, like believing in Jesus or something. Like, well, I don't believe in Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And assume that there's no evidence one way or the other. No, there's a lot of evidence that they exist, but you got to be willing to look at it and have an open mind about it.
Yeah, and I mean that's completely understandable and completely true. I'd agree with that 100%.
Well, see, Shannon, that's why, like I said, I fell out of favor with a lot of Bigfoot groups, because I would bring up these questions like, well, the same questions. Well, and I would say, look, unless you can prove, unless you can come up with Bigfoot, you're going to have to come up with some explanations about why these things are so hard to find. Mm-hmm. Now, we aren't speculating on this just to try to cover up the lack of physical evidence. We're observing a phenomenon that is a corollary of Bigfoot sightings, and that is these weird energy fields. And they have a lot of characteristics similar to paranormal phenomena. And by paranormal phenomena, I would mean something like ghosts or spirit sightings, whatever. There's a lot of parallels to that. But
well, just from my experiences and those that I'm around, I've heard people call into question, could these things be so elusive because there's some type of interdimensional being?
Well, yeah, now see, that's another issue, and that's kind of a real popular issue. And some people think it's a cop out. They say, well, if you can't come up with a Bigfoot, you just say it's an interdimensional being, and that, and that's not very productive. But what we do say is that there could be an interdimensional aspect to this involving the energy fields. Now people will say things like, well, there must be some interdimensional portal. Well, what's the evidence for that? Rather than just arbitrarily, conveniently making one up, what's the evidence for it? Well, the evidence for it is that I think the areas where these ghost-like phenomena occur may be associated with the epicenter of these energy field manifestations, which could have something to do with what I would call like a naturally occurring wormhole. Mm-hmm. And this is something, I know this is very avant-garde, and I think you had somebody on your show talk about that, hadn't you?
Yeah, I've had David Roundtree on, and he's a huge...
Roundtree, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to meet him.
He's absolutely fascinating, and he's so smart it hurts my brain.
Well, here's the thing. We think, or I think, and I've based on my interviews that I've had with researchers around the world, literally, is that these wormholes or these ghost-like are not randomly distributed. There seems to be patterns in where they occur, and they might correspond with some kind of global energy lines and vortices or intersections of those lines. Mm-hmm. This is what they call the planetary grid hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And that's been around for about 40, 50 years. But one of the theories is that if you have places along these energy grids where these vortices occur, that they're activated at certain times. And there seems to be a periodicity. It could have to do with the seasons of the year. It could have to do with the movements of the planets, the solar spot activity. Who knows what all the variables are? But when those things are activated, Shannon, all kinds of weird stuff can happen in the vicinities of where they are. Mm-hmm. And that includes UFO activity, paranormal, I personally think that the Bigfoot may be attracted to the areas of the ghost light sightings the same reason that UFOs frequently concentrate in the same areas. It's because there's some kind of energy shift going on there. Mm-hmm. Scientists have long speculated that there are parallel worlds that are basically like a frequency off of ours, just like a frequency on a radio. Mm-hmm. And that if you could change your frequency, you could literally have a whole different, reality. Mm-hmm. That may or may not be visible interchangeably from one to the other. So I think that's one possibility, and I think that the fact that the Bigfoot are frequently seen in the same areas where the ghost lights occur is maybe some kind of evidence for interdimensionality. Well, but what that is exactly is people talk about that kind of matter of factly, almost as if we understood what that is. Yeah. But that's a mystery.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And but I don't think it's that far fetched though to reach that base. I mean, if you look at spirit activity and ghosts or ghosts, quote unquote, and things of that nature, we are interacting with something we cannot see. Us not being able, and I'm talking about doors opening and closing right in front of you, objects flying in front of you. I mean, undisputable evidence of something that is there which you cannot normally see with your bare eye. So if we're talking about that, then we're obviously talking about something that's existing on a different plane from which we know as our existence. So why would it be any further of a fetch to go that far for, anything in cryptozoology or even within UFOlogy?
Well, absolutely. And the thing is, though, I personally think that the Bigfoot, on one level, are natural animals that live as part of this physical reality. But I think they may be capable of entering some of these, what I could only call parallel realities. I think they may know how to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think they can do it with their brain, with their nervous system, with their instincts, in the same way that maybe alien technologies from other dimensional worlds are able to access it through their technology. Mm-hmm. I have a good friend named Nick Redford. You ever interviewed Nick?
No, sir.
Well, he's written a number of very outstanding paranormal investigative books on UFOs and cryptozoology, and you pretty much name it. He's a friend of mine, and he's from England. He moved to Texas about 13 years ago.
That's
and
a big move.
Really a big change. And right after he moved to Texas, lucky for him, he met me, and because I could kind of break him into the culture, so to speak. But I took him out to the Big Thicket. We talked about the ghost lights, and we talked about the wild man. And he said that, he had investigated other places in the world where there was an association of cryptozoological manifestations that were linked with weird energies, and in some cases, light forms. So he thought that was interesting that association was the same here. Several years later, he got a call from a guy who had been stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana, which is right across the border from Texas, in 1964. And he got deployed with a detachment that went out, 4 guys at the back of a truck, and they went to the Big Thicket, which from Fort Polk would only be 150 miles or so. And they were sent to escort a hazmat team, 2 guys. And supposedly there had been a crashed UFO landing in that area, in the Big Thicket. What he saw with his own eyes is, he said, the hazmat guys came out with a box about 5 feet on the side, a cubicle box. They loaded it into the truck, and another truck showed up from Fort Hood, Texas, and they took it to Fort Hood. And they were told not to mention it to anybody. Well, he goes back to Fort Polk, and a friend of his, who had friends at Fort Hood, told them that what had happened is that they theorized that an alien culture had sent a probe, and in this case, it was a sphere about basketball size or beach ball size. It looked like it was some kind of metal, but it had a kind of a marbling effect that was moved around. It's like it was a plasma contained within some kind of container. And they said that this was in 1964, and that in 1958 and 59, similar devices had been recovered in Arizona and one other state, I forget. The government was concerned that these were sent by alien cultures to introduce viruses into the earth for the purposes of eliminating human beings. That's why they were wearing the hazmat suits. Now, Nick, of course, he had heard my story, so he went with the guy to where he said the thing crash landed. It crash landed within a quarter mile of the place where the ghost lights are seen in the Big Thicket. So there's your vortex connection. The speculation was that there, at certain times, there would be a naturally occurring wormhole that would be open in these locations, and these foreign technologies, alien technologies, could send probes through them. Okay? Now, what made me believe that story, Shannon, is that in 1964, I was a senior in high school. I personally had 4 different UFO sightings of various descriptions, 3 of which were multiple witness sightings that I was involved with, and then subsequently over the years, I interviewed 4 different other people who had UFO sightings, ranging from saucers in the sky to landed craft with visible portholes and the whole works. And they all contained, they were all those sightings happened within about a 6-month period from 1963 to 1964, during the identical time frame that alleged UFO crash landing occurred. So that indicated to me that there could have been a dimensional shift going on there at that time, and that's why there was so much activity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you. I think there's something going on with that, and it could be the same with why particular places are more haunted than others. It may have to do with the overall magnetic condition, so to speak, of the place. Yeah, absolutely. So
now, I don't know what I'm talking about there. I'm just speculating.
No, I mean, I would agree with that, absolutely. I mean, you have certain locations that you look at that are so haunted that you scratch your head and go, what conditions is so different about, I'm going to use Old South Pittsburgh Hospital in Tennessee.
Right.
What conditions about this one place on the side of a mountain in Tennessee, South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, hillbilly nowhere town, Tennessee, what is so special about this one little place that it's more haunted than, battlefields and places where tons of people have died, and you're talking about one little country hospital? What's different about that area, and this may have something to do with why ghost lights cluster in same area in areas too. Yeah. That's
So
true.
this is what I'd be real interested in what Mr. Roundtree, what light he could shed on that. But what I know is this: I have spent over 35 years comping through the woods down here because I became convinced that there was some place in the woods that was a focal point of energetic conditions that manifested in those ghost lights. And I've spent a lot of time out in the woods looking for them. And at one point, I wrote about it in the book. I call it the stream of light. A friend and I actually located a visible stream of energy, visible in the broad daylight. And it was about 30 foot wide and about 30 foot high. And there seemed to be a flow to the energy on it in a direction, just like a stream. Okay, we think that it might have been an arm, a radius of the spiral, and we think that the epicenters of these vortices may be a spiral formation. They have a spiral shape to them, and so this takes time. It takes a lot of personal resources. It takes just getting out in the woods.
Yeah.
To find this stuff, so when I'm out looking, if I'm out, I've given up on trying to track down a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
What I do when I go out in the woods is I just keep my eyes open, and I try to be receptive and non hostile or non threatening. And so, but when I'm going out doing that kind of research, I've also got my eyes open for any kind of unusual magnetic or light form phenomena that I might observe. And I've seen a lot of different stuff like that down here too.
Yeah.
A lot of different manifestations. So it's all a mystery. And what I like to tell people is that, look, I'm basically a newspaper man, and I wrote this book from the standpoint of being a reporter, but not just reporting on other people's experiences, reporting on my own, because I have taken the initiative to try to investigate it rather than just talking to other people about it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm getting older now. It's getting harder and harder for me to do that, but I'm still after it.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Well, I know that we're kind of running a little bit, low on time, and I have like 2 more questions. But I do want to touch on, what is your personal, I know all this would be hypothesized at this point, but what is your personal belief of the evolution of these creatures? Do you think that they're from, they're more humanoid? I mean, what's your professional hypothesis?
Well, my professional hypothesis, such as it is, based on eyewitness reports, based on my experience of how these things exhibit a lot of behavior patterns that are typical of apes. In particular, not even apes, but the monkeys. There's a species, like we said, there's several subspecies, tropical monkeys called howler monkeys. Mm-hmm. And these things they only get to be about 3.5 feet tall, the males, the max size, but they make an incredible noise, volume of noise. Mm-hmm. These things, the closest that I've heard to what I experienced, this would be like a howler monkey, a mutant giant howler monkey on steroids.
Yeah.
And morphologically, at least from the head structure and the eye sockets and everything, this thing looks more like a howler monkey than it does a gorilla or certainly a human being. But so I personally think it is an undiscovered relative of the howler monkey, and that in itself would be weird enough. If we could show that there was a giant howler monkey native to North America that had been never been proven in science. That would be amazing in itself. But then the question arises, like you posed, well, why are they so elusive?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get into these things that we're talking about, the telepathy, the energy fields, and so on. But now, the Native Americans have known about these things for thousands of years. And I have been contacted by Cherokees and Choctaws and Quakiutals and different tribes from around the country since my first book. And they say, look, you know, basically what it boils down to is, look, you got to start thinking a little bit more intuitively to understand what this is instead of just being too little-brained. So there's that aspect of it as well. But I think it is a natural animal. I think it is approaching human intelligence, and in some ways, Shannon, it's going to be more intelligent than us in its environment.
Yeah, to be hidden so well, too. I mean,
right.
You know.
Right, and it may be more intelligent than us in its ecological niche. Certainly, you know, you're on its ground, and you know it's got the advantage. I don't think we have to appeal to interdimensional shifts and so on to account for its existence, but I do think that there are aspects of that are very suggested by the evidence.
So my final question for you, Mr. Riggs, what's the plans for the future? You know, for you, are you still going to just be stomping around the woods? You got another book you're working on? How's the future looking for Mr. Riggs?
The plans for Shannon. Plans for the future is that what we're trying to do is communicate with people who are. I had a guy from Florida call me, and he was real excited. He had read the book. He said, "Man, I'm having so much of the same things happening on my property that y'all described what happened on Tom's property." Oh, and we hadn't got into this, but this thing, whatever it is, kills dogs.
Yeah.
Goes out of its way to kill dogs and kills big dogs that aren't afraid of mountain lions and bears, and this thing kills them. And in some cases, apparently eats them. To me, that right there is the evidence enough for some kind of objective reality. Something's got to be doing this, and there's no known animals that we know of. That's redundant. There are no animals that we know of that are capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So we want to communicate with people who are having these experiences. We want to kind of work with people to encourage them, if they've got the nerve to do it, to try to create a habituation situation where they can hopefully get photographs. We want to try to get them, and we're concentrating primarily on the South because that's what we study, and where we're closest to. And so we're having an event on June the 6th, 7th, and 8th in Old Fort, North Carolina, and we're inviting people to come and participate. And we're calling it a conference, and basically people just come and meet each other and share their stories. And we hope to have events like that around the country. And basically, it's basically about keeping vigil.
Yep.
And that's something people don't want to hear either, because 99% of the time when I go out in the woods, nothing happens.
That's true.
And you've got to have a lot of patience and to keep trying when there's so much, there's most of the time nothing happens. I'll spend 2 or 3 times just maybe sitting having a nice nap out in the woods, and nothing much happens. But when something does happen, it can be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Most people, Shannon, frankly, don't have the patience to do that. Let's face it, or the time to do it.
Yeah. That's true. And a lot of the thing is the patience. You know, I tend to forget because I'm kind of in that same boat that you are. You know, different area of the paranormal field, but still part of the umbrella. But I'm kind of in that same, thing where you got to sit and you got to be patient. And I kind of forget that people don't always have the patience that I have. And so
exactly, and you have the patience because you have enough experience that you know that something's there.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not coming at it from a skeptical standpoint. You're coming at it from an investigative standpoint.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a big difference. So that gives you your resolve and your patience.
Yeah.
And if people ask me, I had a TV station from Houston interview me last week, and they said, "Well, how come you keep doing this for 30 years if you ain't found a Bigfoot yet?" I said, because I've had enough experience to know that there's something out there that's doing something, and also I tend to believe people when I'm getting reputable stories.
Yep.
And some of the stories are amazing. And Shannon, most of the stories are coming from people who just they weren't looking for anything weird. It just popped up.
And it found them.
Now listen to this. It's a little bit off the subject, but I had a high school reunion last week, and a guy that I hadn't seen in 50 years told me, he said, "You're not going to believe this," but he says, in 1964, somewhere in there, same time frame, he was out squirrel hunting in the woods in the Big Thicket, and he found a tree where he thought was full of squirrels, and it turns out he gets to go to shoot them, and it's a bunch of spider monkeys.
What?
Yes.
In Texas.
And I told him, I said, "Well, let me tell you why I believe you, other than the fact that I've known you and I know you wouldn't lie. This guy was a Vietnam veteran, Air Force officer, fighter pilot. Mm-hmm. This is a down-to-earth guy." I said, "Let me tell you why I believe you. In that same time frame, some guys shot a spider monkey not too far from here in the next county, and they knew nobody would believe them. There were 3 or 4 of them, so they took it down to the Beaumont Enterprise and had them take a picture of it, and they all swore that this wasn't hoaxed or staged, that they had shot it thinking that it was a squirrel in the woods." Now, let's say that wormhole is open during that same time frame, Shannon. Those spider monkeys could have thought they were in South America.
Yeah.
And just showed up in East Texas, because some of these wormhole effects may actually connect places within this same reality.
That's true.
That's the old out of place animal phenomenon. That people have reported seeing wild kangaroos in Illinois and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Is that they're going through naturally occurring wormholes from Australia to Illinois. Well, there may be one that goes from Mexico to East Texas.
True.
I don't know how you account for it, but the point is it all adds up to the fact that we may not totally understand the geometry of space-time in the physical world. Mm-hmm. It could be far more subtle and weird and interdimensional than we care to think about. I mean, because what's to say you couldn't go out in the woods and walk into a wormhole and just disappear,
That is true, though. I mean, that's completely true.
Yeah. So the point is, the point is, what I really love about all this, and one reason I've stuck with it, is because it is a mystery. Mm-hmm. And that our scientific materialistic philosophy that we're taught in our universities and so on in this country as being the only way that you can look at reality, it's just not the case. That reality is far more mysterious and complex. And of course, we find that out more and more all the time. Mm-hmm. And so that's what keeps me motivated.
Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Mr. Riggs, for being on tonight. And for our viewers, one more time, Mr. Riggs' website is www.bigfootthebigpicture.net. It is up on your screen right now. All of Mr. Riggs' books you can find on Amazon. I know we didn't get to talk about all of them, but right. you have Bigfoot, Exploring the Myths and Discovering the Truth. You have Big Thicket, or In the Big Thicket, On the Trail of the Wild Man. And you also have Weird Texas. Yeah, I was a co-author of that, yes. Yes. And they're all available on Nook and Kindle and on Amazon.com. And the Bigfoot book you can buy. Most Barnes and Noble bookstores are carrying it. That's cool. That's a good thing.
And by the way, it's also available in Canada and Australia and the UK. If you should have anybody listening from those.
Maybe it'll reach that far. I don't know. I know we've reached some Canadians before, but I don't think we've reached across the oceans yet.
Yeah.
So I'd be surprised. I honestly couldn't give you an accurate perception of that or not, though. But I want to thank you once again.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I thank you for the opportunity, and hope your listeners have enjoyed it. It to me, it's just fascinating, and it's easy for me to keep motivated.
Yeah, but that's how it should be. It should be something that you're passionate about and that you can constantly keep motivated and wanting to do. If it's not like that, then you're doing the wrong thing.
Right, and people say, "Oh, you're just in it for the money." I said, "Well, I've lost a lot of money doing it."
You don't get a lot of money doing this stuff. I mean, there's like a few people who do, but they're very rare, few and far between. It's not like...
Right, I'm at a definite negative cash flow at this point in my life. So.
Yeah, it's usually about the passion, the dedication, the search for the truth. Like I said, I mean, yes, there's a few people who are in mainstream media that do capitalize very profitably off of this, but a majority do not. No,
and there aren't that many people who make a living as full-time writers or investigative reporters. Very few. No. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. And for all of our viewers, one more time, next week I'll have Camden Randall on. He'll be talking about the government UFOs files, the conspiracy of cover-up. And you can tune in next week right here, same time, same place. Don't miss us. And once again, thank you to Mr. Riggs for being on. His website, once again, is www.bigfootthebigpicture.net. Thank you, everyone, for turning in, and I'll see you right back here next week. Same time, same place, and don't miss it.